My name is Alice Knapp, and I'm the CEO of the Ferguson Library. And as I'm talking, this is a beautiful time for you to mute your telephones. My voice is less important tonight because we want to hear from the panel, but I just wanted to, first of all, thank the panel for coming and having this very important discussion. I think it is so vital to have these discussions around intellectual freedom and the freedom to read in the library, but in this day and age. I don't know if you noticed, but Stanford is not Brooklyn. And we just did not have the money that Brooklyn Public Library had to take a very proactive stance when these increased number of challenges of books occurred to make the challenge books offered to anybody across the country who wanted to read them. It was an incredible act, and it was a very proactive act. So even if you're in Plano, Texas, you can get a Brooklyn Public Library card and have access to banned books. But we felt very strongly that we had to do something. And we followed Chicago Public Library's lead in becoming a book sanctuary library. This is not a legal term. It doesn't really change what we do. I mean, in fact, all public libraries are book sanctuaries. That is what we most of us, if not all of us, have adopted the ALA Bill of Rights to Read. We have a process when someone comes in and challenges a book, and we follow that process. So what we are doing is the same thing that we have done, but we've amped it up so that we'll have hopefully a lot of discussions around the importance of reading diverse books. With that, I'm not going to talk further. I'm going to hand it over to my good friend, Don Reed, and I blanked on your name is my good friend Don Reed. You're in good hands because I've seen him moderate so many discussions, and he's actually moderated them here at the library. He is the Equity Institute, the training officer for the Equity Institute of Domus. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Don.
What an honor and privilege to be here, to be able to stand in front of you and to be in a country where we can enjoy the privileges and protections of being able to access information. And that you've all come out to celebrate that tonight. How privileged we are to have people who represent us, who are watching out for our rights and for making sure that our protections are there and that we can access materials and that we can continue to educate ourselves and that we can continue to be in community with each other. And so I'm so grateful and honored that you're here tonight. And I was very honored to be asked to be here. And it's nice to see the faces in the room and to realize that you are change makers in this community, and you all have power that you bring to the spaces in which you operate in. And so we're grateful that we have these powerful folks with us this evening who wield a tremendous amount of power, but do it in a way that is loving and representative and moves the dial forward. That we are in Connecticut, that we are in Stanford, we are indeed lucky in many, many ways, and to have our great leaders with us tonight. I have, for many years, known most people on the panel very, very well and have ongoing relationships with them. And I could spend time talking about each of these amazing human beings, the work that they've done, the representation they give us here in Stanford and in Connecticut. And we're grateful that you ensure that all voices are heard. And we are grateful for the work that you've done and for the opportunity to be in your presence tonight. Tonight, I want you to hear from them, and you're going to hear very little from me. And so we have a chance to hear from our panelists about some questions that have come in, and then hear from audience members as well. So this is participatory, but so be thinking about what comes up for you and what you might want to know. I'd love to hear from the panelists, and we are, often people will read you long bios about each person who's here this evening. We're asking the panelists to identify themselves tonight and to introduce yourselves. We want to take a moment and thank you for being with us and to welcome you into our presence. And we look forward to hearing from you. And thank you in advance for your leadership that you are giving every day. So with that, can I turn it over and have each of you introduce yourself as you would, please. Also, as you're speaking, I'd invite you to think about what is your favorite banned book? That you know that there are books out there that have come up in different parts of the country that are targeted, that have been deemed to be offensive in some way. And so just wondering if, as we go along, what's your favorite targeted book? And if you'd share that with us as well.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I won't take up too much time. My name is Hubert Delaney. I'm the state representative for District 144. For everyone's edification, that's where we are right now over into the Merit. I'm a lifelong resident of Stamford. I spent the first few years of my life in Wilton, but grew up over down on the water side. I serve on the Appropriations, Judiciary, and Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, and it's an absolute honor to be with you here tonight and with my good colleagues. You know, I don't keep an avid list of banned books handy, but I would say that the two that I like most would probably be Who is Dr. King, which is a children's book, and All Boys Aren't Blue. I think those would be my two. And with further ado, I'll pass it to my colleague.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Excuse me. My name is Matt Blumenthal. I'm state representative for the 147th district, which represents part of Stamford and specifically Glenbrook, Springdale, Belltown, and a significant part of North Stamford in the Turner River area as well. I've been in office since 2019. I chair of the Government Administration and Elections Committee, and I also serve on the Judiciary Committee and the Transportation Committee. My favorite banned book, I actually looked up the top 10 most banned books, and Not All Boys Are Blue is one of them recurringly, so good choice. My favorite of the ones that's recurringly in the top 10 most banned is Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to join you this evening. My name is Rachel Khanna. I'm the newly elected representative for the 149th district, which covers Greenwich and Stamford, North Stamford. And I became an American citizen in 1994 and was born and raised in France, where going to libraries and getting books is not customary. So when I moved here at the age of 8, it was such a treat for me to go on a weekly basis to the New York City Public Library on 10th Street. And so I think as Americans, we're so fortunate to have this resource that gives us access to so much knowledge and information and other resources. And we really shouldn't take that for granted. And when I looked at the list of banned books, I was surprised at how many of them I knew. And I think my favorite one is The Kite Runner, about a young boy coming of age in Afghanistan.
Thank you. I'm State Representative Corey Paris. I represent the 145th District. I'm a member, Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee, and also a member of the Education and Higher Education Committee. If you'd asked me this question when I was in high school, I'd give you a whole list of books I would have loved to have banned. So I was forced to read a lot of books I just didn't like. But coming of age, you know, you really start to appreciate those experiences and what you learned from the literary tales. For me, I think probably one of my favorite banned books is The Hate You Give, and also To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, that's terrible. I should have gone before you because I'm Ceci Maher, and I actually grew up in Glenbrook, and I am the recently elected senator for the 26th district, covering Springdale, Belltown, and Glenbrook, parts of them that Matt and Senator Miller doesn't have. And I grew up in this library. It means the world to me to be here tonight. And my favorite books actually were going to be To Kill a Mockingbird, The Hate You Give, which is newer, so I'm going from old to newer, and the one that was, I haven't read it yet, but I can't wait, the one that Texas banned, and they're just talking about closing down 3 libraries because of it. Larry the farting leprechaun.
Thank you, Ceci. Good evening. I'm State Senator Pat Billy Miller. I represent Darien and Stanford, East Side, West Side, South, and parts of the North Stanford. I've been a legislator since 2009. I've been a senator since 2001, so I was a rep. I passed the baton over to Representative Parrish for the 145th. I am the chair of banking. I'm not going to name my other 5 committees because we have so many, as Ceci knows, that we share, that we have to be on. So unlike Matt, I brought my book. And Matt, it is The Bluest Eyes. So I love Toni Morrison, and I bought the book about a year or so ago. Never got a chance to open until I looked at the list and I was like, oh my gosh, now I know I have to open this book, because the reason why I bought it was because Black women struggle with their identity. And Toni talks about that in this book. And seeing why it was on the list, I can understand. But I think as a society, we have to understand that children are faced with issues that they keep hidden. And maybe if they read it in the book and see that they're not the only one, it would help them to heal. So thank you again for having us here this evening.
Hi, everybody. My name is Douglas Lord. I am the only librarian on the panel. I am. Thank you. Thank you. I work in Newtown at the C.H. Booth Library. I'm also president of the Connecticut Library Association. This is an association of about 750 professional librarians all across Connecticut. I am completely thrilled to be here. I have 2 favorite banned books because I'm a librarian. I get 2. So the first one is Richard Wright's Native Son. It's about 100 years old. This is a difficult book. This is an author at the height of his powers. He is describing something that is so uniquely American and important. Read this book. The next favorite one, it's not The Farting Leprechaun. Winnie the Pooh is frequently challenged because the people who are against Winnie the Pooh say this offends God because you have talking animals.
My name is Michael Hyman. I am a member of the board here at the Ferguson Library. And libraries are sort of my favorite things. So to support the Ferguson and to be here tonight is certainly an honor for me. I love books. And so that as the other panelists listed off, many of those books I've read. I love them actually very, very much. But there are 2. One, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, was a book that I taught to about 90 students at Turner River, middle school students at Turner River School. The Richard Wright book that was mentioned was certainly a clarion call for me when a teacher introduced it to me years and years ago. And so I love that. But I also brought along one other book that I heard that it was banned in Florida. And so I went out and bought it specifically because of that. It's called Going Down Home with Daddy. It is simply a children's book about reunion and a family taking a trip to visit grandma on the old farm. This book has been banned. And so it speaks to what people are attempting to do. Not just for the intellectual property or the intellectual ideas of those of us who are adults, but they're reaching to our children to make sure that they snuff out stories that may be uncomfortable. So I'm hoping that some part of our conversation tonight will arm us with what we need to do to ensure that that does not happen.
How lucky we are to have an institution like the Ferguson Library. How lucky we are to live where we live here in the United States, and how lucky are we that we are in Connecticut, where we have such amazing leadership that is stepping up to the plate to say that we want to make sure that freedom is firmly in place and that we have institutions and we have policy that support individuals and humans. And we're grateful that you're here with us this evening to enter into this dialogue and have the discussion with us. I'm going to share a couple of things with you in the form of a question, and then turn it over to Senator Maher for just a moment. The Ferguson Library is the first sanctuary library in the state. The Ferguson Library is the first sanctuary library in the state of Connecticut. And it's the second in the nation. Now that's amazing. It's the second library in the nation. And what exactly is a sanctuary library? And what is our legislation doing to encourage freedom of ideas in our public libraries? Senator Maher, would you share with us a little bit about sanctuary libraries? We have two different types of microphones up here. There we go.
Okay,
Thank you.
so it's actually done for all the years we've known each other. It's Maher.
Maher.
Sorry.
You're
I
good.
know, and we've known each other for so
No,
long.
because I call you
But
Ceci all
we
the
need-
time. I'm sorry.
I know, but you always go by first names. So anyway, just wanted to correct that because I'm a little
Apologies.
wiggy about it. Sorry. Okay. Sanctuary Library. I went to a meeting of librarians where they invited legislators to come. And I believe you were there too, Matt, right? That night? And we heard the story of the Stanford Sanctuary Library, and it really resonated with me because I can't imagine as a child being told I couldn't read a book that I wanted to read because it's so important. One of the librarians who came up to speak at the public hearing for SB2, which is the bill, I'm getting to it, is he said, and I just keep repeating this because it so resonated with me, books are both a window and a mirror. The window to see through to the world that we don't experience ourselves, and a mirror so that we can see ourselves, even if we don't see ourselves in the world. And that, to me, is the reason why we needed to put a sanctuary library in SP2. And one of the questions I had today was, well, doesn't that seem like you're talking about children's mental health? Isn't this, you're just tacking on this sanctuary library into a mental health bill? And my answer was absolutely not, because mental health is when you are seen and when you can vision a future. So that is why that's in the mental health bill coming out of the Senate. So what is the sanctuary library going to do? It looks to a public library in a town, a principal public library. And as long as that library is designated as a sanctuary library, meaning that books are available, they can be lent, no one is going to be kept from having the book, and the book is going to be, books are going to be available, all the banned books will be available, then certain grants will follow that designation. So that's what it is in SB2. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is for Douglas Lord, who is the president of the Connecticut Library Association and the director of the Cyrenius H. Booth Library. And Mr. Lord, can you discuss the ALA's the Freedom to Read statement and give us some insight on where the statement comes from and how it influenced the decisions in the library?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. The American Library Association has a Freedom to Read statement. It's been modified a few times over the years. I believe that it was created in 1953. And in the backdrop of the United States at that time was McCarthyism and the Cold War, the Red Scare. So anything to do with communism essentially was out the window. Some of the titles that were under consideration at that time of being challenged or banned were Robin Hood, 1984, The Wizard of Oz, because of their politics. Other things included Lady Chatterley's Lover and Lolita. But at that time, the librarians got together and decided that the freedom to read is essential for our democracy. It is part and parcel of the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom to receive speech. So that right is continuously under attack, and more so in 2022 and 2023 than perhaps ever before. The association has kept records for the past 20 years. And even though we are not fully through the fiscal year, the amount of challenges in the United States has doubled, more than doubled. It's tripled over the course of the past year. So when private groups and even public authorities in various parts of the country work to remove or limit access to works of intellectual works of one's intellect, is terrible, and or seek to weaponize those against certain aspects of the population when they call them objectionable. That's when the librarians stand up and we say, oh, hold on, we believe in the right of Americans to pick and choose what they want to read. We believe that Americans can recognize propaganda or misinformation when they see it. Librarians are committed to helping people recognize those facts, but that people can make their own decisions about what they read. Essentially, if you don't like a book, don't check it out. If you don't want to go to a program, don't go to that program. But it is in American heritage that the free press is protected. You don't necessarily need more laws to protect that. And in the Connecticut Library Association, we favor free enterprise in ideas and expression. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot rolled up into that. But to sum up, we believe in your constitutional rights as patrons, and we work very, very hard to make sure that those are followed.
Thank you. How lucky are we to be in the city of Stamford and to have such an amazing institute like the Ferguson Library that is really looking out for us and providing in the community. So I am going to pose the next question to a couple of you, if that's all right. But I'll start with you, Representative Paris. It seems like opponents tend to attack books that include LGBTQ perspective or are accurate depictions of our nation's history. For instance, around slavery or civil rights movement of the 1960s. Why do you think these themes are being targeted specifically? And why do you feel it's important that these perspectives be available to the general public?
That's a great question, Don. Thank you. I think America has a real identity issue. And someone put this to me in a political sense. So it was so eloquent, so beautiful. They said, Barack Obama is what America hoped to be, but Donald Trump is what America actually was. And when you think about that, it speaks volumes to how we try to always cover up instead of taking accountability for what we're actually responsible to doing in our society. We keep talking about, well, our society needs to fix this and our society needs to be more tolerant. Well, we are the society. And I think the reason why so many of these topics are targeted, it's not because it's wrong to be free in these thoughts and speech and form of expressions, but it's because people are uncomfortable and unhappy with themselves. And we as a country, for all intents and purposes, for all the greatness of what we are and what we've been able to accomplish and overcome, we still cannot have that great reckoning and being comfortable with the uncomfortable with ourselves. And I think until we have those really honest conversations, until we begin to peel back the layers of injustice and inequity, and really become a country that's committed to understanding and listening and letting people live and learn from other experiences, we will continue to repeat this cycle year after year and generation after generation.
Thank you. Could I pose that same question to you, Senator Miller?
I think it's out of fear. I think that when people don't understand something, they become afraid and they refuse to learn. And I say that as a Black woman, something that I faced, even my hair texture. People didn't understand my hair texture, and they would feel it and want to feel and touch. I didn't allow it, but want to feel it and touch it because I was different and they didn't understand. And so hatred kind of rolls out of that, right? Intolerance. I think that we refuse to be tolerant of one another, which causes us to dislike each other. Growing up with a Southern background where you're not, and believe it or not, in the South, I wasn't taught to hate. And I was taught to love everyone, and that we all come into this world different. We come in different shades, shapes, and colors. And my mom always taught us that you have to love people regardless of who they are. And so when I say fear, the underlying current is hatred. And that we are intolerant of each other, which brews hatred. And it brews other things like the bombings that we've seen, where the bombings and shootings in the clubs. And it's because we don't understand and we refuse. And it goes back to what Representative Paris stated, is that we refuse to try to understand each other. And we do have an identity crisis in this country. And it didn't start 10 years ago. It's gone back from centuries, and it's gone back to my ancestors, where it's the fear, not understanding someone. Because you don't understand it, you feel that it's wrong and it's not right because it doesn't line up with what you believe and what you think is right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Would you like to? Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for your replies. I would just like to say also that this is all of our jobs, right? Librarians are very committed to this work. I bought a house. I don't not fix the problems that exist in the electrical system, in the plumbing system. This is now my house. So America is our house. We are responsible for fixing these problems, for acknowledging them and getting them from point A to point B. We may not be able to get them all the way to the finish line, but we're certainly responsible for our part of the dialogue. It's not Joe's problem or Barack's problem or Donald's problem. It's our problem. So we're all in this together. And just from the librarian perspective, I want to say that's essentially why I and my colleagues get up in the morning. It's not to circulate like Clive Cussler books. It's to actually work on things and make the world a little bit of a better place. So thank you for letting me jump in.
Great, thank you. Mr. Hyman, I'm going to put it to you because you're one of the great historians that I know, and that you're a voracious reader, and you have a knowledge base that is deep and extensive, as do all of our panelists. But I wanted to hear from you, Mr. Hyman, if you would, thinking about how LGBTQ plus are portrayed and how the civil rights movement has been portrayed. And because you're such an advocate to bring history to light, what's your perspective?
Well, thank you very much, Don, for tossing me that hot potato. So now people are really going to expect something here. I think that what we want from everyone, or what we might want from everyone, is a sense of, or an ability to critically connect the different parts of our history, the different parts of the things that have happened in our world. Like Senator Miller, I come from the same home state. And many people think of it as being the US being a free place. But I can tell you that I and Senator Miller were not born on free soil. And that may rile some people to understand about that, but South Carolina was not free, literally was not free. It was an autocracy for certain people, and it kept other people enslaved right from through the 1860s into the 1900s into the 1960s. And that's a fact. one of the things that happened was that how we told the story of the great lost cause, what that was, the valor, the honor of the Confederacy. And when we told that story, we opted to ensure that the other parts of the story were not told. So in my South Carolina history book, there was one page that was dedicated to the Negro. That was it. But that was mandatory South Carolina history for every South Carolina student. And it did not tell the story of the trials, the tribulations, the persistence. So this is about, again, we're seeing a replay of people attempting to diminish and bury the stories of others. This is about power. It isn't about whether we tolerate one another, whether we like or love one another. This is about America and the sense of having power to do and say and to tell what that story looks like and feels like, and to validate it with all of us. So if Florida and Texas can make some determination about what books we read, well, they've been doing that before. Many of us know this, that what was written and available to schools that came through Texas determined what many of us were reading in northern states. So we need to make sure that we're making those connections about what's going on and how this is going to impact our children, to the extent that someone is prepared to say that this book here, Going Home with Daddy, is somehow subversive, means that we've prepared to reach to every level and to snuff out those stories that may be different from what the American story or narrative should be, based on what some other people believe. So I'll stop with my lecture.
That's great.
Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to, building on Michael's statement, 50 most banned books. Would you have guessed that they're LGBTQ books, or would you guess that they're the reality of the Black lived experience? It's the reality of the Black lived experience. 61% of the 50 most banned books are that, and 40% are LGBTQ. And then in young adults, 49% of all the books are in young adults and 19% in picture books. Can you imagine? So, Michael, your point about trying to make sure that stories aren't heard, that we don't face the way our country grew, the secrets that we've held all these years, the ways we've diminished people's stories. We're seeing this play out now. And it's, for me, it's extraordinarily frightening.
And when I see bans happening, I become very concerned about where is it going to end? Who gets to determine what books, right? What do we have access to? And so I'd like to first direct this to Representative Khanna, if I could. Do you think that bans begin a slippery slope towards censorship? And I'm sorry and what might be some steps that we could take?
Yes, I do think that, we've already reached that slope into censorship. And interestingly, I recently read two books, Celeste Ng's Our Missing Hearts and Richard Powers' Bewilderment. And in both of those, they talk about a society in which there's extensive censorship and tyranny. And to Senator Maher's point about, books being both a window and a mirror, and it's very frightening to think that this is the future that authors are envisioning for us. And, I think we just need to keep speaking out and creating sanctuary libraries and just really pushing against that as best as we can.
Thank you. And Representative Blumenthal?
Sure, thank you. I think bans are censorship. I don't think it's a slippery slope. I think we're there in a lot of places. And I think says two things to us. One of them promising and one of them worrying. The worrying part is that there are these people who want to deprive individuals of these stories, of these perspectives, who want to impose their will on others. But I think the positive side of this, or the promising side of this, is that tacitly that contains an admission that if people get these ideas, they will find them persuasive. If they hear the story or read the story of the Black lived experience in America, they're going to understand better what it's like to be a Black person in America. And they're going to understand the demands that people make on that basis. If people read the stories of LGBTQ individuals in America and across the world, they're going to understand what it's like to live in that skin. They're going to understand what it's like to live that way and what people have faced. And they're going to be more understanding and loving towards one another. And so ultimately, I think Michael hit the nail right on the head. This is about power and the fear of loss of power, loss of the power, not only politically, and I think it's being used very cynically politically, but also fear of the loss of control, of dominance over the cultural narrative about determining who gets to be a protagonist in the story of America. And so I think there's both a danger here, obviously, but there's also a promise. And I think what Stanford's done, what the Brooklyn Library has done, what we're doing here in the state is the antidote to that. What we have to do is make sure people get these ideas, because if they get them, they get access to them. If they can breathe them, they're going to find them persuasive, and they're going to be won over to be better people and better citizens.
Thank you. The next one I'm going to put to Mr. Lord, if that's all right. What can Connecticut libraries do to allow readers in other more restrictive areas or states to access banned content, whether it's virtually or by other means? Would you share with us some ideas of?
This is a very tough question. I would love to be able to do what Brooklyn is doing. They have a project called Books Unbanned for young people that allows access to books for to young people across the country. My tiny little library, even a mighty awesome library like the Ferguson Library in Stamford, does really just, we do not have those kinds of resources. And frankly, if I was to try to enable ebook access beyond my community, the licensing and price structure of what I would have to pay for that is completely absurd. It just wouldn't be able to happen. Would I like that to happen? Yeah, absolutely. Can there be sanctuary libraries that are physical that don't have to be in public libraries? Yes, absolutely. I think that's one way that a grassroots effort could really help. Little free libraries, or, in my library, we've made available just free copies of, what people consider to be banned books or books that are being challenged. You can just take them away for free, read them, learn something, pass them along. Good will happen from that. But this question is very vexing for librarians. We believe in sharing everything that we possibly can. Lots of different kinds of information across all sorts of platforms. And not only do we do that for able-bodied folks, but we do that in large print for folks who might have visual impairments. And we do it on audio for people who have an ADA concern. We do it in every possible way that we can. And yet there are still limits and restrictions that are placed on us. Libraries are great because the more you use them, the more money that they save the community. But they're also complete. If any of the librarians were to go on like the program Shark Tank, every single judge would be saying, yeah, no, I'm out. You want to use tax money to fund educational things for free for people? Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So it's really difficult, but are we trying? Yeah, we're trying, but it's going to take waves of effort, pendulums of effort. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Can I ask you a follow-up question? And then anyone can join in past that.
You want to know all the secrets to library land, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Would you please?
Yep.
So we are obviously community that are gathered here, and the folks, as I look around in this room, I know so many of you, and I know the work that you do, and we're really grateful that you are on this team of thinking about racial justice, thinking about true knowledge and ways that we can always make our community better. So would you share with us some of your ideas about what we as members of the community can do to support the intellectual freedom and choices in our public library?
Some of it is just showing up like you're doing tonight. I thank you for coming. Like, this is really meaningful to me. I drove a long way to get here. This is very important to me. But if you had tried to sell this probably in any other community, not as many people would show up. It's important. This is a beacon, right? This library is known as a best practices library. Alice Knapp does amazing work. There's reasons you're all here. What? Not yet. You didn't yet. But most libraries have support groups. If you're from another community, they might have a friends group that you can join. So they're called Friends of the Library. Some have political action committees, PACs. But librarians are very used to marshaling various kinds of forces for various kinds of ends. So if you just show up and, make the offer to the library director, like, hey, I'm here to help. Generally, they will be like, that's great. What can you do? And they're going to put you to work. And it's not going to be shelf reading or shelving books. It's going to be doing important work like this kind of grassroots organizational stuff that is very critical to democracy, but it's also becoming more and more vital for librarianship. Also, the people on this panel, you know them, you know who they are. Keep talking to them, keep talking to their colleagues. It is absolutely thrilling that libraries have received attention from the legislators, because any opportunity for librarians to crow about, all the good we do is wonderful. But these are the folks who are actually in charge of things. I would not want to be in their jobs. They are juggling thousands, literally, of bills, committee assignments, budgets of this, that, and the other thing. But the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I have been a librarian for 30 years. It has never been the library's year. It's always, oh, it's a really tough year this year. Always. Do police cruisers get funded? Yeah, they do. Do new fire trucks get funded? Yeah, they do. It's going to take somebody that sits there and makes the tough decision, like, you know what? The library's getting a little bit this year. And they're going to capitalize on that. And they're going to show the metrics of why it was so important that this funding came down the pike. So show up. That's 2 words, a very short summation to a very long answer. Thank you.
Thank you. In a few minutes, we're going to open it up both to the audience and those who are on Zoom to be able to enter your questions in. We'll do our best to try and synthesize those quickly and get questions out to the panelists. We want to make sure that voices are heard from the community, and we're grateful for all the work that you're doing and for being open and willing to answer. We had a couple other individuals in the room and they may have just stepped out, but we'll make some introductions in just a moment if they return. But I did see Mayor Carolyn Simmons was here just a little bit ago. Dr. Lucero was here. And I know that one of them has stepped out on the phone, so hopefully we'll be able to see them again in a moment. But we have access to a group of pretty amazing panelists here. I wanted to be able to go back to each of you, and not in closing thoughts, but I'm sure as you were preparing for tonight, as you were thinking about what it is you wanted to bring into this space this evening, I just wanted to open a couple minutes to each of you to be able to share what's on your heart or what you're thinking of or what you're working with in this area as well. And could we just start at this end of the table and go down? Is that all right?
Yes, sir. That's not a problem at all. I would say that the 2 big takeaways for me touch a little bit on what Representative Paris and Senator Miller and Mr. Hyman talked about with regards to fear, and a little bit about what's been said overall at this table about creating an example, and particularly what Senator Maher said. When it's about, and I'd like to talk a little bit about my own personal experience. For everyone who knows me knows I come from a military background. For those who don't, I hope you will, I would like to thank you for your patience for me using a military example, but I'd like to talk about the fear. In my experience, with leadership, people are afraid because they don't want to seem wrong. It's hard to talk about sexism, for example, because you don't want to be labeled as sexist. We don't want to talk about racism because we don't want to be labeled as racist. I experienced that in the Army when dealing with commanders. And one of the reasons that's because is a lot of times in the military, you have instances where commanders have this pressure to always be right. You're asking people to take on actions that can be life and death. And so the pressure to be perfect all the time is there. But I would say it's important for two reasons. One, because that's the only way I see a solution. I don't think that there's going to be one bill or policy that automatically fix generations of feeling and fear and hatred. But slowly, by having these awkward conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, as Mr. Hyman put it, we can work towards a solution. But two, because what was talked about with a mirror, when I personally believe that when young folks see themselves reflected in the institutions of learning that they visit, it allows them to see themselves. And I think that's important because of when we talk about growth and development. Children dream of becoming adults, and those formative years can create the blueprint which can follow them for the rest of their lives. And so investments in that development, in that growth, and allowing them to see themselves yield a priceless rate of return, particularly with allowing people to see themselves who might be on the margins, who might feel like they're on the margins. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Representative Blumenthal.
Thanks. So it is such a pleasure to be with you all here at the Ferguson Library. And for me, I've always loved libraries. And I think to me, at a basic level, they represent two fundamental values. One is that knowledge belongs to everyone. And the second is that they're community building spaces. Now, we've seen that all here tonight, but I actually am lucky enough to have one of those little free lending libraries on my front lawn. And it is amazing to look out the front window and see the people walking by and they stop. They take a book, they leave a book. Nobody needs to tell them what to do. They are just sharing knowledge, their experience, things they've enjoyed, and taking things that they will enjoy and learn from. And it works. It's a symbiotic community that develops on my front lawn. No thanks to me, I didn't build it. But I think additionally, the value that everyone deserves knowledge is one that this library and libraries generally represent. It's great if you can afford to buy books, but many people can't, and that should not be an obstacle to your ability to enjoy them and learn from them. And one issue that we've seen, it was alluded to a little bit earlier, is that with the transition from physical books to ebooks, we've transitioned from a physical object that has theoretically infinite lifespan and sharing potential. You can lend it to a friend, you can give it to the library can have it as long as it can keep it taped together, to ebooks are essentially a license, and the companies that sell them or license them have started imposing very narrow restrictions on how they can be used. And one of the things we've heard from the libraries here in the state is that these restrictions are interfering with their ability to share these books with the public and to do the kinds of things that we were discussing, and which I think the Ferguson Library would like to do in jurisdictions that are banning banning books. So we have two bills in the legislature this session, one that's been passed out of the Government Administration and Elections Committee, which I chair, and another out of Planning and Development. They are companion, not competing bills, and they both have strong bipartisan support. And their intent and objective is to give libraries greater bargaining power, to push back on some of these provisions that are restricting them from sharing with each other, from sharing with their patrons, and are limiting them in terms of their resources because an additional expense has been imposed. So we're very hopeful that we can craft at least one of these bills into something that will not run afoul of any existing federal law and allow the libraries to have additional freedom to fulfill their missions.
Thank you. Representative Khanna.
Thank you. And yes, thank you again for including me this evening. So I'm the parent of 4 young women, and that informs a lot of what I do and a lot of how I think. And I have the permission to tell this story, but my youngest daughter is gay. And so we talk a lot about, you know, what she's reading, what we're watching in movies, and often in movies, you know, we started talking about how in movies, there's this sort of bury the gay trope. At the end of the movie, they just kill off the gay character because what can you do with them? And so she's sort of in applying to colleges, she's motivated to go into film because she wants to change that narrative. And it's, you know, to what Senator Pat Billy Miller were saying before is, you know, our children have so many issues that they keep hidden. And it's so important for them to be able to recognize each other in literature and media. And really books are a starting point for ideas. And what a shame it would be to limit them.
Thank you.
So for me, this is incredibly personal. The banning of books and the slippery slope in which we face is personal. And I reckon back to a moment when I was 28 years old. I was home visiting family, and I had to clean out certain things in my old room. And I shared this earlier this evening. And my grandmother had this big box, and I knew what the box was. And it was a box of books that I had checked out from the library years ago that I refused to take back. And she said, today is the day you are getting in the car and you are taking them back. And here I am marching in, having to take back these books. And as I'm walking in and trying to, you know, get out without any photos being taken, of course, I noticed that there was an English learners class being taught in the library. And when I listened to Representative Khanna talk about her daughter's experience and identity as an LGBTQIA member, when churches weren't accepting of certain groups, the library was accepting. My grandmother, when she was growing up, when she wanted to go learn about different parts of the world, you remember all of those Britannica encyclopedias, and if your family was able to have every volume, you were doing pretty well. That was her safe space to learn about the world in which she would be able to travel and go off and explore and expand her lived and shared experience. And clearly for me, it was my way to pickpocket books and never return them. But when we listen to so many in the community, and certainly Alice Knapp is a steadfast leader in this space, and when we talked about what our libraries actually contribute to our society, to our state, to our community, to our kids, it is invaluable. And so when we do talk about this war that's going on with little things like Mickey Mouse, right, in Disney World, and we talk about this going on with books, let's fight a war against bullets and not books. Let's fight a war about keeping our kids safe, but making sure, ensuring that we are allowing for them to understand the lived experience from every person, from every walk of life, from every inch of this globe, due to the 4 walls of libraries all across this country. And so I'm grateful for you, Alice. I'm grateful for Stanford Library, and I'm really grateful that I'm not in trouble for those overdue books.
Thank you, Representative Paris. Senator Maher.
My mother would never have let me not return a book. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yes. So I have a lot of thoughts because I've been thinking about this a lot ever since we had that conversation in January, I think it was. One of the things that I wanted to go back to what banned book is a favorite, and I forgot to mention The Handmaid's Tale. And the reason is we practically lived in this dystopian near future recently. And it's a patriarchal, totalitarian, theocratic society. I never want to go there, ever, ever, ever. So when I think about what the future is that I want to see, that I vision, it is a place where libraries are always open and they are funded. Because we were just having this conversation earlier about the work that we all need to do up at the state to make sure that we get more funding that's actually in the budget sent out to the libraries. But I also lastly wanted to say that conservative parents across the country have been pushing schools and public libraries to shut down digital programs so that because those programs give children access and the parents feel out of control and they can download them and read books on smartphones or tablets or computers. We have to be vigilant. You know, I can't remember, I can't remember who it was who said, you need to use all of us, but you need to use all of us. If you hear of things, if you think we ought to know about it, even if we already know about it, just hearing your voice, reinforcing it is so important. So if anything, that's what I want to leave you with, is please contact your legislators, because we need to be so vigilant to not allow this to continue in our country.
Senator Miller.
Thank you. So most of my legislative career, my work has been based on reading. Reading is very important to our students. Frederick Douglass says, once you learn how to read, you're forever free. Banning books and not letting students be able to look at the world, be able to connect to what they're reading is an injustice. And that's how I look at this. Banning books is an injustice. And what was disturbing for me was, or is that I know Connecticut cares, but what about the rest of the country? That's what's disturbing. What's going to happen to the rest of the country? We saw what happened to our students during COVID. There was so much learning loss. Think of these students in these other countries. In Texas, they're closing the library because they don't want to adhere to what the judge had said, that they could not ban those books and they had to put them back on the shelves. Those students are part of our country. This is the future of our country. It's not just the future of our state. It is the future of our country. So this isn't just a Connecticut issue. This is a national issue. And I would like to see a national platform in trying to fight banning the books. Because I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until my colleague here, when she had asked me if I wanted to participate. And I really didn't think about it, because banning books, because we have so much freedom in this state. And so when I started putting my thoughts, thinking about it and just reading up on it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we are in trouble. We are in trouble as a country. What's going to happen to this young man here? And I hope you don't mind me pointing to him. He is our future. If we don't make sure that he has every opportunity to be successful. And what is that? Reading. How's he going to know about places outside of Stanford? Reading. How's he going to know about what it is to be a young man that looks like him? Reading. And so I would like to see a national platform in fighting the banning of books, because I know in Connecticut, we're going to get it right. We're going to get it right in Connecticut. But I think that if we're going to survive as a country, we have to do better. And that it's something that we need to fight as a collective body, as citizens of the United States. And so, and just one last thing, one of the things that I thought about in researching my banning of books, I said, gee, Pat, your ancestors were killed because they tried to learn how to read. And it looks like we're back there. We're not physically killing people, but we're emotionally and spiritually killing people. by banning these books. Thank you.
Mr. Lord.
That is a very tough act to follow. So books are the problem, right? We would just want to get rid of the books. Maybe all these problems will go away if we get rid of the books. So books are for education, books are for reading, books are for people. Do bear in mind, babies are illiterate. So let's not include the babies in that, all right? That was a joke. It wasn't a very good one. I like babies. I like reading to babies. Babies are illiterate. I guess it's the delivery. So librarians are not pushing some sort of agenda. Just because a book might be controversial or make people stop and think, we're not going to put it on the shelf. Librarians always get up in the morning and they always say, what are the values that my community has? What offerings, what programs, what educational things can I do for this library for this community to make the world a more informed place, a more literate place, a more considerate place. Decisions of all the libraries I've ever worked in, and there's been a lot, are based on readership, on reflecting their communities. And to be honest about funding, just because a book is published doesn't mean it makes its way onto the shelf. There are some very, very stringent policies, procedures that all public libraries go through for a book to make it into the doors and make it onto the shelves. It's not just willy-nilly. But we've heard this is not really about books. It's almost not even about intellectual freedom. It's more about power than anything else. And I just want to say that I am so grateful to be on this panel, making terrible jokes that don't go anywhere, talking about these issues as seen through the lens of a community. The library can be a very, very powerful force in any community for good, for progressivism. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with politics. There are conservative people who are progressive. There are liberal people who are progressive. What can we do? We can get together just like this. We can have conversations. We can find the common ground. We can do this. We've done this over and over and over during the course of American history. It's time to kickstart it again. So thank you again for letting me be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And Reverend Hyman. Yes.
Well, one of the things I love about SB2 is that it is proactive. It is looking ahead. There are going to be instances where people will respond and react to book banning, other anti-intellectual things that may come about. But SB2 is a proactive item. And that's one thing that I love about the idea that we all need to be proactive about how we deal with our current state of affairs in this country. Representative Blumenthal said something, and I actually wrote it down too, that who gets to be a protagonist in the story of America? And so knowing that that story is not really just one story, it's many different stories. I can't believe that someone thinks that if I cut you out of the story, my story is somehow enlarged. It is, in fact, if you do that. But there's room in the library and volume after volume after volume for everybody's story. But think of how petty this is, that someone wants to cut out part of the story when there's room for everyone and every story in the library. So that's the extent to this power play that's happening. And so that if anything, I think that we all need to be prepared. The senator mentioned being vigilant. That is certainly the case, that we should be prepared, we should be vigilant. And being prepared and vigilant is that we need to be prepared and vigilant for the Rosa Parks moment that is coming. It will definitely come. And will you recognize that you should actually sit on that bus or that you should actually stand in that particular place to make it happen. Librarians will be asked and have been asked to do this. Others of us will be asked to stand in the gap in those occasions when someone will say, we're moving through, but we need teachers to do that as well. That Rosa Parks moment that says, no, I'm going to teach this, Mr. DeSantis, regardless of what you as a politician says. I'm going to, as a librarian, make sure that this is in our library and available to all who may come. We've got to be prepared for that moment, and we need to be able to make sure that we recognize it when it happens, because sometimes it can happen so softly and so sweetly, we don't notice that our rights are being taken from us. Each of us has a role to play in this. And so I am so happy and honored to be here with you. And I'm hoping that you're charged up to make a difference in some way. Thank you.
So I want to welcome those of you who are joining us via Zoom tonight. There are more members who we don't actually see in the room, but who know the importance of joining us tonight, and welcome you into the room. So we're going to open up the microphone and we're going to hear from the audience. We're going to take questions. You have access to this amazing panel and to be able to ask questions about what is happening both in Stamford and here in Connecticut, and to be able to hear wisdom and insight from our panelists. So we have 2 microphones that are coming around in the audience. And Alice and Garnet, thank you for helping us out with that. And we will take questions from the audience.
I was wishing there were someone here from the Board of Ed, but there is. Because I wonder how much influence the library has on the public school system.
Well, Alice is here also, and I don't know if our superintendent is still back there. She is.
Dr. Lucero.
And yes, she should probably answer this, but I will tell you that these 2 women, Dr. Lucero and forgive me, Alice Knapp, work so well together. The planning and the efforts that they make jointly, I can't say much more about it other than to say, watch out, Stanford, there's some good things headed our way because of the work that they're doing.
Stanford Public Schools and the Ferguson Library have had a long-standing relationship, and everyone might not know this, but our students can check out library books from the computers inside of our schools, and those books are then delivered to their school. So it's a great partnership. They can use their student ID, so it's nothing that they have to get ready. And I really have to thank Alice. It's one of our first initiatives we did together when I was the assistant superintendent, and I was so proud of that work, and it continues today. So we have a great partnership, and our students have access to all the books in the Ferguson Library. I like to come to events and not talk. That's why I sat in the back of the room. Thank you.
Senator Miller, I think I have it right. You mentioned that this is a national problem. That's true. And I'm wondering if when you pass a bill that does have national implications, even though it only applies to Connecticut, do you send that to the other state houses throughout the country? And if not, maybe that's something you would want to do on these issues of national importance.
So to my knowledge, no, we don't send them, but we do have organizations that track the different bills throughout the country. So, and they're think tanks as well, but that's a great idea. It really takes organizations that think tanks and that's where a lot of our legislation comes from, where we're approached by lobbyists or organizations, like we have the early voting that Senator Representative Matt Blumenthal is going to make sure gets passed this year. That's a joke, Matt. I wasn't putting you on the line, but no, that's an idea. But no, but normally there are organizations that track bills, and so I know that I use them as a resource if I want to know what another state is doing. But thank you for that idea.
Yeah.
I swore I was going to stay silent and let everybody else talk. There's actually only 2 bills in the country that are proactive in protecting libraries. One is in Illinois and one is in Connecticut. And it's not that's not a coincidence that yet, because the book sanctuary movement started in Chicago Public Library. There are several bills across the country that will limit access to information. And my colleagues in Oklahoma right now actually had to consult a lawyer whether or not they could answer reference questions around abortions. So it's a very, very scary time for librarians right now.
Thank you, Alice.
Excuse me. Thank you all. This is great. We're reading the Library Bill of Rights and the Freedom to Read statement. Thank you. So how do books get banned? Are there bill of wrongs? What's the process?
Each public library, usually I mean, this can go for boards of ed school libraries, academic libraries. There's Connecticut, for example, has 165 principal public libraries, but there are over 900 libraries in the state of Connecticut of various types. I can speak for the public library as well as most school libraries. There are policies and procedures that one goes through. Sometimes those can be anonymous. So I know in the community I work in Newtown, yes, sometimes they can be anonymous. That's particularly disturbing to me because freedom of speech also means you don't have the freedom to, you need to be liable for your freedom of speech. It's like calling fire in a crowded theater. But all public libraries, and I would hazard a guess that most school libraries, K to 12 libraries, have a policy that is buried within their collection development policies. These are very, very well thought out and very, very well intentioned, but there is usually the opportunity for a member of the public that needs to be a resident or sometimes doesn't need to be a resident to object to a book, to call for a reconsideration. And I've been to meetings where these hearings get so overwrought and so emotional that people are shaking and crying and they're acting like I'm, gonna nip off a finger or something. I mean, is it worth all of this? Some people seem to think so. But that's the first step, is this reconsideration of material. Now, in Connecticut, yes, we're deeply blue. Yes, we have these policies to protect libraries and procedures to go through. Many do not hit that point. There are about 35 challenges active in the state of Connecticut, ranging from Westport all the way through Ashford. They're in every community. Some challenges never become public. Somebody is exerting power on a helpless librarian to remove a book. Or the more traditional way, frankly, is the person who objects to that book goes and checks that book out and never returns it. Like maybe they'll pay for it or whatever, but that's like a hide the pride, hide this and that, and the other thing. All of those are power differentials. All of those have to do with power, with culture, with fear, with all of the things that we've been talking about. Actively banned books in the United States do tend to be relatively few. Like a governmental body, the federal government or something like that, has actively banned a book. Sometimes they then become unbanned. So like a good example, the Pentagon Papers in 1971, for a time that was banned. And then the Supreme Court said, okay, you have to release this information. So there's censorship, there's banning, there's challenges. All of these have different permutations. All of it is fairly dangerous.
Just in Westport, because that's part of my district. And I watched a 2-hour meeting when There were books that were in the Staples High School library. And they were a listing of banned books, I mean, the actual physical books. And one mother in particular took this to the school. And there, I just wanted to mention that there was a 9-step process to have review, to have the person who is concerned about the books speak to them, why, all the reasons why. Everyone on a 10-person committee in Westport read the books, they met. It's been going and going and going. And the 10-person committee decided not to ban the books because they felt that they were reflective of stories that people wanted to see, and they didn't find them pornographic, and they didn't find them sexualized. And so that's the recommendation. But now there are more steps still where the superintendent has to rule, and then that can be appealed until a final, and then it goes to the RTM. So it's in Westport, it's a very, very specified, and I'm sure in Stanford, they have the same sort of thing in the schools. But anyway, but can you imagine the time this is taking? The time it's taking when everyone is stressed about teachers and learning. So I'm just going to leave it there. I'll stop.
I want to thank our, yes, go ahead.
Hi. It occurs to me that often when you have a situation like this, the louder voices are the ones that are trying to suppress, right? And so I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how we can turn up our volume. Like, how can we get the message? How can we, maybe source through newspapers to put in a series about a lot of what we discussed today, educating people in a more, our cocoon here are people that are sort of in the know, right? But it's the whole rest of the community that we need to heighten their awareness. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts or suggestions.
I have a quick thought, and then I'll pass the mic to someone else. Book groups, have book groups, get together and talk about the banned books and invite people to your book groups who are not normally there. Invite people from the other side who don't necessarily agree with you. Bring community together to talk, because only by doing that. I was listening to, I'm going to say Senator Murphy. He was talking, no, sorry. It was Congressman Himes was talking about how important it is to not demonize and diminish other people's belief systems, that the only way we're going to come together as a community, and I think, Matt, you referred to this, is by talking to each other and actually engaging. So that's what I'd say. That's my first thing off the top. Invite people to your book groups, have dinner, definitely have dinner, maybe some wine, but feed them and they will come.
Reverend Hyman, did I see your nod early on? Okay, I'm sorry. There's multiple microphones, but we like this one.
Well, again, back to the things that we can do to raise our volume. I thought that was an excellent idea about sending information around to other states to let them know. And I believe that the idea is that think tanks usually do that type of work, but it is important to take joy in it and to say we need to move it forward, because I happen to know that there were many, many bills on the other side of the aisle, conservative bills that were written in other places, and it was cut and paste into different legislative bodies around the country. They made it efficient to do it. We also need to be thinking about those types of things, suggesting to other states, here's a good piece of legislation that you may want to try in other locations if we want to match the idea, the conveyance of information so that people can quickly digest and to legislate something like a Senate Bill 2. I think that's a very good thing to do. I also think on raising the volume, yes, these are like-minded people in this room, but we've got to tell others about it. The Advocate ran a good story or op-ed piece here in town. We need more of those, and we need to continue to talk and to read and to do so freely and to share it. Let's not hide the idea that we're reading banned books. Let's make it a cause célèbre for everyone.
Thank you. You're so nice, Corey. Thank you. So, Mr. Hyman reminded me of something when you talked about, do we share? On the flip side, other people from other states normally contact us about an issue when there's a controversial issue. And so that's one of the things that you can do when you find out something that's happening in the state of Texas or in Georgia, that you can write their legislators as well, because we get that all the time. We've had buses come from other states as well.
Thank you, Senator. And the other thing that I think just dawned on me is when we talk about some of these experiences of where the banned book campaigns are taking place, they're not happening oftentimes in urban centers. They're taking place in the suburbs. All of the great fights and challenges that we're having right now on housing, voting rights, reproductive rights, you want to call critical race theory, whatever you want to say about it, are all happening right there in the suburbs. But I think what's really important is that the community voice that is in this room right now that understands the bill and the policies that we're trying to enact and implement to protect these rights for all people, conservative, liberal, whomever, those voices need to be heard in areas that are not being targeted yet, to let them know what's on the rise. We have board of directors meetings for libraries all over the state. Attend them. Let your voices be heard in those spaces as well, because I think if others are having sleepy moments and they're not paying attention to this, it's only a matter of time before those books begin to disappear. And then the identity really is truly lost.
Thank you, Representative Paris. We are at that magic hour, and I am not looking to hold back anyone's voice. Are you all right? Okay, so what I want you to know is that we have amazing leadership and you have access to them. And they are here this evening. These are thoughtful individuals who bring so much talented experience into the work they're doing. And we are so lucky and so honored to have all of you represent us and to be in the spaces that are making a difference. And so I just wanted to say I am grateful for entering into the dialogue with us this evening and for your thoughtful responses and for the amazing work that you are doing to represent all of us. So thank you. Could we hear it for our panel? And I want to bring Alice Knapp up for a moment.
Oh, I was going to say something. I just want to say, Alice,
Yes,
thank you so much. I love seeing Alice when you talk to her face, when you talk about the library. She gets so excited, but you've done some great things for this library. I mean, I've been coming here since I was a child, and just you and your team, and you truly, truly, truly have a passion for what you do. And you want to make sure that students in this city love reading. And so I just want to say thank you so much for the great job that you do.
This is a little overwhelming. I did want to close out and give you some, take home homework to do. But I do want to say that on Zoom, it's the library industry. There were so many librarians who couldn't come down here tonight, but were very, very supportive of this meeting, of this conversation, that you were willing to take your time to talk about what is a passion for us. And I think you got that sense from both Doug and us. We live and breathe intellectual freedom. And it's an honor to work in Stanford and to be in this library at this time, because I inherited a great library, but I have a wonderful team working for me. And so many of them are here tonight to listen to you as well. So So the action item is read a banned book. I mean, there was a couple of them that I'm still recovering from Richard's right. To read a banned book. The second action item is talk to your legislators. They get emails from me all the time. They like it, I think, but email them and let them know what you're concerned about, especially when it comes to banned books. And if you're an ebook reader out there, House Bill 6800 is incredibly important because it will enable us to buy more e-material. So that's it. Everything we have, the amount of money that is SB2, every little bit counts because we can always leverage it a little bit more. So let them know. So that's number 2. And 3, the third thing is if this program excited you, we will be putting it on our YouTube channel. Share it with a friend. Share it with 2 or 3 friends, put it on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever your social media thing is, and share it, because that's how we magnify what we experienced tonight. And with that, I would just want to thank our incredible Stanford delegation and my wonderful Don Reed.
Thank you for thinking about the things that are really difficult, and thank you for the work that you do. As I look through this room, there are so many activists and people who are in leadership roles and people who lead quietly, but people who are really, truly looking at the most important issues. And that is our freedoms. And that is the ability to read what we want to read, to be able to serve in the way that we need to serve, to be able to open our hearts and our homes and our community to those who need us, and to those that America has been founded upon, and those that we've tread upon in our work. And so the fact that you're here tonight speaks volumes, that you are change agents within your community, whether you are talking to your sister, whether you are talking to your family members, whether you're talking to your community, or you're leading an activist project. Each of you has a voice. Each of you has a voice, and you need to remember to use that voice for your good, to raise that awareness, to have those conversations, to have the uncomfortability in the room, to be the person who's a little bit of the agitator at the holiday table, and to realize that I love my family, but they are who they are. And that journey doesn't happen overnight, but being around you, being in community with you, working beside you, going to events that you're hosting, hearing the passion that you list on Facebook pages, people begin to read that. People see it. And if they respect you, you're going to be able to change lives. And so I want to thank you to all of our panel tonight for doing just that, for representing us, for helping to change lives, and for securing our liberties. Thank you all for being here tonight. And thank you to all of you. I have a feeling many of our panelists will also be here. If you had something that was really striking you, please see them.